Start the recording for this. So I'm going one, two slide too many. All right. Should be good to go. Okay. So go ahead and get started. So just first off and foremost, thank you all for joining the webinar today. You can actually ask questions, and we want to make sure that this is as interactive as possible for you all. So if you do have any questions, go ahead and type them into chat down below. I'll try to stop a couple times through the presentation just to make sure we're answering any questions for you all. Like I said, I want to keep this as interactive as possible. Don't want to try to do any death by PowerPoint, but just want to make sure I'm getting a lot of the information across. But feel free to type anything in chat. I think Nicole will be looking out for those questions and answers, but we'll go ahead and get started in this. Thank you guys for joining this webinar. We will be going over kind of the new normal, what challenges businesses and enterprises are facing, but also on the education side as well. So first, my name is Josh Sato. I am one of the Cisco collaboration specialists for Cisco and our distributor on the ScanSource side and the ScanSource team. So just wanted to introduce myself. I've actually been on the Cisco side for about a year now, but actually came from the reseller world. So for the past 6 years, was actually working with a bunch of my clients within the UC world, doing implementations and also working on the software side. I had helped some enterprises around software asset management, and really understanding a lot of those subscriptions or non-tangible kind of items, and how do you keep track of them? How do you make sure you're getting that adoption? How do you make sure you're getting that ROI out of it? And that's really what I'm going to kind of dive into a little bit, is making sure that you're getting kind of the value out of your licensing. And when you're looking at a solution like Webex, making sure that you're getting that value out of it to really begin with. So first, just wanted to cover, what our agenda is going to be like today. So first, I'm going to be going kind of through that new normal workplace trends, and then second, talking about what's built into the Webex platform as far as intelligent meetings, and then even on the back end for IT, that granular control and analytics of within Control Hub, and then looking at some of those differentiating factors for Webex, like collaboration security, and what's built into it from that perspective to give IT the tools back to make sure that they're locking down that environment and making sure that no data is really leaving the organization. And then again, talking from the competitive and kind of compatibility landscape, but talking about the compatibility within the Microsoft stack. So if you're utilizing any Office 365 tools, looking at integrating into those tools and optimizing that workflow. And then lastly, talking about Webex in the education space, how it's changing some of this distance learning and how it's really helping kind of with this new normal and driving forward. So first, just talking about this new normal, talking about work for a lot of these enterprises, and talking about how work just really isn't kind of that work is more of an activity and not necessarily a place. So traditionally, we had our workplaces, we had our traditional four walls and a business that we would drive to really every single day, and this is where that traditional workplace and kind of evolving it out to that new workspace and creating this kind of hybrid environment. And this is really what COVID has really forced a lot of organizations to look at, and it's really been kind of driving this digital transformation forward, is figuring out, hey, how do I keep our people distance and keep them safe while also helping them create that same tools that they're used to and that same workflow that they're used to. So talking about how organizations must really adapt in real time. So as I was kind of mentioning before, looking at employees' kind of safety, how do you help them remain as effective as they can while still helping them remain, or while keeping them at home and giving them the ability to work from home. So it's enabling that workforce to continue to function in those processes. So IT is really having to look at, how do I re-engineer this environment, the culture and workflows, but additionally on the back end, it's how do I get more kind of visibility into that environment, because people aren't going to be inside the office as they traditionally are. So how am I going to know they're on meetings? How am I going to know they're being collaborative or using this product? So that's where Cisco and Webex really want to create a lot of those tools on the back end and those platform and tools to give that visibility back to IT. So it's kind of all three of these are becoming a pain point now for a lot of organizations that are trying to figure out, hey, how do I go to a work from home? How do I kind of figure this out from that kind of point of view? And next, we're going to talk about, what does this modern workplace look like? What does collaboration really need? And really creating that agile and kind of integrated workspace. So another kind of problem is we have is with re-engineering these workflows, not only for kind of those end user workers, but really it's, there's a bunch of these kind of dispirited tools and applications that are people really are living in and out of every single day. And every department is going to be a little bit different in every company we look at. They may be using different tools. So maybe you have your Salesforce or somebody else who's using Salesforce, that examples, or CRM, but you may also have anybody in HR, anybody in marketing that's maybe utilizing Box or Dropbox as well for some of their, data or kind of cloud storage. So you want to be able to create those kind of APIs that are connected integrate into those workflows. So that's where Webex comes in by creating some of this collaboration tools by being able to connect into some of those workflows. So then you're not having a lot of workers jumping in and out of tools. They're able to work in one kind of space and create that single pane of glass kind of collaboration environment. And that's what is helping drive a lot of this adoption and kind of services forward. So this isn't a Cisco slide, but I always like bringing it up. It was something I always would go out and kind of talk to a lot of my customers with, because when I was going out and really talking to them about what they're utilizing for, their voice, video, and their collaboration, I really wanted to understand what their workforce looked like and what kind of problems they were really having. So I liked using this slide because it was an independent study that was done out of the UK, but a lot of it transfers back to how the US likes to work and how our, generations like to work. But a large part of workforces nowadays are going to be in that X and Y phase, and we're seeing a lot more of the Generation Z coming into it. But one thing I always like to point out was really where that communication preference comes in, and where those preferences, when really making financial decisions, come in. They still like that face-to-face experience, even if it's through a virtual space, still having that visualization, still having that best-in-class kind of HD video, but getting that kind of face-to-face experience, just as if you're sitting across the table from someone, is still a need for each one of these generations kind of based on that. So I always like pointing that out, just because, as you're thinking about your workers, as you're thinking about your deployment, these are the tools that people are usually asking for. They still like to have this face-to-face video, especially as we have a lot of people working more from home. It helps keep them engaged, and it also helps a lot of times, and Cisco's kind of done some numbers on it, but they've actually looked at the analytics as well, and they found that utilizing video actually helps with meetings to actually help them end about 10 minutes earlier. So then you're giving time back to those users additionally, just by having them utilizing video. And you can actually help the adoption of that from an IT side by actually mandating, video when they're going into a meeting. They just press the one big green button to press, and that launches them into a meeting, and it would automatically start up their video. So you can help with the adoption of that, and it can actually help kind of cut down on some of the time there too. But also, I wanted to also kind of step back a little bit and look at this as why companies are adapting some of these types of solutions when it comes to collaboration and, utilizing all these different connectors and kind of APIs to creating an agile workflow when it comes to collaboration. Well, companies are really adapting to have to stay competitive. So, attracting and retaining talent is going to be a very important one, but mainly for, those offices, or maybe for those companies that really aren't tied down to certain geographical locations. So one kind of example of this, I think, was a few months ago. I think it was Twitter or Facebook. I can't remember the exact example, but they were talking about not going back to the office and kind of keeping remote, a permanent thing. And they were talking about how this can actually help them with recruiting outside their normal kind of geolocation. So now they're able to grab people from kind of the middle of the country because they're going to be outside of the office, but they can still work with the rest of their teams, collaboratively, just because they're utilizing the platforms that they are. So as we're talking about staying competitive, it's using this kind of technology to be able to retain talent, to give them the best workflow possible, possible. So then they're concentrating on the forefront of the business. And really where this comes down to is talking about that employee engagement and what that challenge looks like. And that's where, Cisco has kind of looked at Gartner and looked at the past kind of 5 years, on what this discretionary effort and kind of intent is to stay for a lot of these customers. So when we look at this intent to stay, those are going to be, employees that are really actively looking for new jobs. They're sending out resumes, they're putting, their open availability or whatever it is on LinkedIn, but they maybe already, actively searching for jobs. They're going through the interview process. So we see this kind of intent to stay really drop over the past 5 years, and we really haven't seen any rise in it, but kind of the more worrying number is this discretionary effort. And these are the people that are willing to kind of go above and beyond the normal call of duty. So depending on what their roles are, they're not willing to really step outside of those roles or really go above and beyond their normal call of duty and just willing to kind of do the bare minimum. So we're even seeing that engagement really go down. So, why does engagement really matter? And these were some kind of statistics that were done really kind of pre-COVID, but looking at this, businesses and business leaders and management are going to be compensated on company engagement and as far as employee engagement. And as we have people going to a work from home or hybrid workspace, keeping them engaged is going to be even more of a challenge because now we're having them outside the office. They don't have anybody, necessarily looking at them or keeping them honest when it comes down to it. So it's what tools are built into the platform that can use you to really help this engagement and really help people, not only on the training part of it, but help you get your ROI as fast as possible. And this is where really that engagement is driven by kind of the complete experience, right? And what does this complete experience look like? Well, as I said before, that physical experience when you're communicating virtually is going to be that superior HD video. It's going to be that best-in-class audio. It's going to be intelligent digital camera tracking, which we'll kind of get to a little bit later when we talk about some of the AI features. But it's also that workflow experience like we were talking about before by optimizing some of those applications. So not only do you need it to be simple to use, but you also want it to be secure when you're sharing any type of content, but you also want to have any other type of AI features and quality of life features built in, which we'll get into. But really, down here in those highlighted features are really integrating in those collaboration productivity tools like Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, giving people the ability to work in there, do whiteboarding or whatever else for each one of their team spaces, and then integrating every one of those workflows, into the API, into the Webex stack. So then you're really having them living in one space and not having to switch between two different applications or sit there if you have a team that's working on a project going, hey, where did we leave off with this project? Is it sitting over here? Do I have this document sitting over here? And having to switch back between email or Webex or whatever else your tools come down to, they're having everything sitting in kind of a single pane of glass. So making them more engaged, and it's really driving that engagement forward. So next, as I was kind of talking about before, helping with a lot of those quality of life features, but really talking about these intelligent meetings and really this cognitive collaboration is what Cisco's really calling it. But it's creating that, it's providing more insight and context to enabling meetings and helping them work a little bit smarter. Excuse me. So the people insights portion of this, so if you do have a meeting with an outside organization, let's say, for example, it will, depending on kind of the domains they're using for that email, if you have people's insights activated within Control Hub, it'll actually look at, any type of information, if they've had any, news information, stock information, earnings reports, any of those kind of briefings. And it'll actually create everything in a nice little area. So before you go into that meeting, it'll pull up any articles for you. So you have some kind of prep work previously done, or you're able to go into that meeting knowing kind of the newest and greatest of what's going on internally at that company. But it's saving you some time from having to go out and kind of scrub the internet. But it's going to pull back kind of publicly sourced information there on the company based on kind of those people insights. And then looking at the Webex Assistant. So this was released, so it actually is GA right now, but it's going to be transcription services. So you can have, just like on this call, some transcription services or even some subtitles for anybody who might be hearing impaired, but you can also have the recording on the back end and where it's transcribed. So if I'm sitting in a meeting and let's say I missed something, or I have in my notes something that maybe didn't really make a lot of sense and I want to go back and watch that video that I recorded, I can actually utilize some of those transcription services to be able to scrub through that video. So I can look out for keywords so it can scrub me straight into it, so I don't have to sit there and watch an hour-long, meeting that we had, it can scrub me into the 30 minutes when that keyword happened because it noticed it through that transcription service. But there also are some other features within there. So if you want to do any type of kind of follow-up, it'll also do some note-taking. It'll also send out emails after it. So a really great kind of quality of life feature, especially for anybody who's going into meetings or really goes into meetings and doesn't like to take a lot of notes or doesn't want to be distracted by taking a lot of notes. You can utilize this Webex assistant to do it for you. And then as we were talking about before, some of the speaker tracking and intelligent framing and facial recognition, which we have in a kind of a later slide, but on the speaker tracking and intelligent framing. So as we've seen it, when you have people that may be in a conference room where you have 5 to 10 people, you kind of have that big overview where you have the entire table and everyone's kind of lined up around it. Feels like you're kind of on trial, right? Because you're sitting at the end of the table and everyone's sitting there. Well, when you have this intelligent speaker tracking, what the Webex system's actually able to do is it's using facial recognition software to figure out who in the room's talking. It's using the spatialized ways that the speakers work if you're using a Webex device as well to figure out where that person is in the room, and then it'll actually intelligently frame them. So then when you're talking to someone on the other end, they're seeing that big overview, but when somebody's talking on the end of the table, it will automatically go into that person and kind of frame them intelligently, so then that person's talking to you. So it creates this better experience for them and really a better meeting experience for them as well. So as we look at a lot of these cognitive collaboration tools, these are really what all is really going to be encompassing it. So it's a lot from the virtual assistant side to the intelligent framing, to even utilizing some of the facial recognition, but even into some of the noise suppression, proximity intelligence, which we'll kind of look at in a little bit, and even real-time meeting analytics on the back end, and then even into some of the encryption and kind of the data privacy, which we'll kind of touch on a little bit as well. So this is where we're kind of looking at that facial recognition side of it. So it's actually able to kind of notice there is a person on that end of it, so it will frame them. But additionally, if you do have a connector into your Active Directory at your company, and you do have people that upload their own photos to their Active Directory, what you can actually do is have that AD connector in with Webex, so it can actually do this in facial recognition and actually pop your name up right underneath you. So as you're going into a meeting, people know who you are on the other end of it because you have that connector in there. Just another little kind of quality of life feature that helps for those people on the other end of the call, because they know exactly who they're talking to, and you're kind of saving, that, hey, let's go around the table and figure out who people are so I know who I'm talking to. Now when they're sitting in these rooms, now you're able to kind of do that a lot more intelligently. And then looking at, the noise detection, suppression in meetings, this is becoming even more of a problem as we have people going to work from home or, learning from home or whatever else it comes down to. You have a lot of noise, right? So whether that's, mail being delivered, whether that's dogs barking, whether that's, landscapers or whatever else happens in your house, you're able to suppress a lot of those. And what Webex does is it's looking out for these noises. It's aware of what these noises are, so that it can actually suppress these noises too. So as you're sitting on the call, you're not having to worry about these distractions, because we've all been, on a webinar, we've all been a part of a meeting before where, somebody does something or a dog starts barking or somebody gets a package delivered and they're not on mute, and, it just distracts everyone on the call and they got to say sorry, where now you're able to have those kind of suppressions built into the meetings. You're not having to worry about those problems. And this is what I really like. I really like talking about this slide, especially when we're talking about kind of this, new way of working and kind of, how can we help out around, with COVID and helping people go back into the office, as you have cognitive spaces with intelligent buildings and room occupancy data. So there's a couple of case studies that should be coming out from Cisco, fairly soon, that are talking about how they're utilizing some of these spaces and how they're utilizing some of these to help with kind of the distancing or social distancing. So let's say I had a meeting room, where normally I had it maxed for about 10 people or so. Well, it's a little bit smaller of a meeting room, it's a smaller space. Now I want to make sure people are kind of distancing. So I want to keep that number down to 5 people, for example. So before, how we showed kind of that facial recognition, the WebEx boards and kind of the WebEx devices are able to utilize the facial recognition to figure out what is called people count. So you're able to see how many people are actually going into a room, so you can have it intelligently go in. And if you have 6 people showing up into a room and you're only allowed 5, it'll actually tell them, hey, we noticed there's 6 people in the room. You have, 1 too many, so that you have to have, somebody room leave, or we can book you into another room that can fit, or facilitate more people. So that's kind of one option. People are utilizing these kind of people counts and these kind of cognitive spaces. But additionally, people are using it for those touchless experiences. So let's say, or even cleaning experiences. So let's say you have, a meeting room where people can grab them kind of ad hoc or whenever they want to, and they can, save that meeting room. And let's say somebody wants to schedule that room after them. Well, you want to make sure that room's probably cleaned down, because of facilities or whatever else. So what it can actually do is you can actually have it intelligently. If somebody tries to book that room after, it can say, hey, somebody's using this room right now. Facilities has got to come in and clean it. So what I'm going to do is move you to another room that is open, that is cleaned right now. So you're not having to kind of do all this stuff on the back end. It's able to intelligently kind of do a lot of these meeting rooms. So there's a bunch of kind of enterprise applications for it. Even from the university side, we're talking about higher education too. If people are looking at, utilizing some of these rooms, they can use this kind of cognitive spaces and kind of intelligent building and room occupancy data as well. And I won't get into another use case, but people are also using them for their carbon footprint by looking at, hey, where's the sun the highest and where can we shut down air conditioning in some of the rooms. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of dive into this as well. And if you have any questions, we can always look at that a little bit later. And then, looking at kind of the back end within the, WebEx kind of control hub, what's built in to help IT, troubleshoot, look at some of the analytics from the business side and really help manage everything, because that's what it's going to come down to. Is really the most important is getting that visibility into that environment and making sure that you're not really having any issues. So as far as on the troubleshooting side, if you have somebody who calls you up and says, hey, I'm having some bad audio data, or I just had a really bad kind of video and audio call. I want to figure out what that problem is. Is it my network? Is it my PC? You can get down granularly into Control Hub and see, some of those. Do I have any packet loss when it comes to voice or video? Are they dealing with any issues on their network? Or is it maybe that they had another application open on their computer, their CPU was pinned, and it was creating some issues with the video and the encoding on that side of it? So you can actually look into that to figure out, hey, is it a problem with the actual device or is it a problem with the actual product? And then on the analytics and business insights portion of it, so if you need to do some reportings by saying, what is the usage and adoption really looking like? And this is where I figure is really the most important information if I'm looking at it from an IT and really a financial perspective, because I want to make sure I'm getting that ROI out of the product that I'm purchasing. So understanding that usage and adoption, figuring out who those people are that are really utilizing the product and how could I utilize them as, internally within the company by, either helping them help with the adoption side of it, or if we're having a lot of people struggling with the adoption side of it, what can we do as far as training and learning around there too? And then just managing everything. So, being able to control provision straight from the platform and kind of control everything along with the troubleshooting and business insights is creating that single pane of glass kind of environment for IT to be able to go back into, Control Hub and be able to manage all these end users on that side. I'll kind of stop right there real quick. So we're a little bit into it, but is there any questions down in the chat, Nicole?
I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So if you guys do have any questions that come up afterwards, you can always reach out to your LightWerks team and, we can hop on a call or have an additional conversation too. So don't feel like if you don't ask anything, you don't have to ask anything here right now. So next, I'm wanting to kind of talk into some of the, competitive differentiators and really, how does WebEx differentiate itself from some of the competition out there, when it comes to from a security standpoint, what's really built into it and why do they really want to make sure they're differentiating themselves with this, enterprise application and what they're doing to protect their users on this side of it. So this is kind of one of those slides that Cisco, had used, and it was more for kind of their security side, but it does talk to what a lot of businesses are really facing nowadays, and especially when we're looking at COVID, as people going to work from home, you're having a lot of these environments, people working off network, for example. So they're going to be going to a work from home, or they're off that company network. So it's how am I securing that data and those collaboration conversations wherever they're having, because I want to make sure that nothing gets kind of hijacked in transit. So this was actually, a lot of these numbers were based off of an independent study done by Ponemon Institute, which actually interviewed about 2,500 businesses just to understand really what their pain points and challenges were around kind of cybersecurity. But about 72% of them saying that they experienced a cyber attack within the past year. And the average cost of a compromised environment is about $1.24 million. So they were looking at this and saying that, how can we help our data? How does our collaboration really help our data? And what is Cisco doing kind of from that end to making sure that they're locking down the data and making sure that nothing's going to be able to get kind of hijacked in transit when we're looking at this. So Cisco wants to point out, and they want to make sure it's very important for their customers to understand that they do have a data protection program. And it wasn't something that was kind of set up out of kind of the GDPR compliance, but was actually created to consider some of the embedded programs within the GDPR kind of consideration. So really, it's that kind of customer and market expectations for them. So simply put, the Webex customers really expect Cisco to really provide kind of this protection when it comes to their data protection program, and then also on the competitive kind of differentiator. So having this data protection program is a real competitive differentiator, because many of the customers are really they either don't have kind of a data protection put in place, or are looking to kind of Cisco or some of these tools to really provide them some of the guidance. And then on the risk landscape side, being able to protect that data wherever it is and wherever it kind of resides. And then even on the legal obligation side, right? So if for some reason you are to be able to be hacked and it somehow came through, the Webex portal or anything like that, they will help within the FTC when they come to audit to be able to show the commitment to their customers, and be able to help through that process, because they do have this data protection program. And that's really where kind of that value proposition kind of comes in around, Cisco and security and creating this secure collaboration environment, because you are paying really your dollars for the product. Cisco is going to protect that data. They're going to make sure that data is secure and make sure that your privacy is really, first and foremost. So this is where their overall approach is really hiding that user identity as highly and as widely as possible, and then creating this true end-to-end encryption of your content and giving granular control back to the IT team. So if they need to integrate it in with other products, they can, that it's not going to mess with it, but creating this true end-to-end encryption really on that side of it. So looking at, where is the protecting data? Where's the content? Well, it's going to be protected in use. It's going to be protected in transit and at rest. So no matter if it's sitting on that local PC, if it's sitting in your data center or in Cisco's cloud data center, or if it's going in transit, you're not really having to worry about it. Now, I know a lot of protecting data when you're talking about kind of collaboration, if you kind of seem like, well, what kind of data, maybe kind of have to worry about? Well, a lot of companies, for example, if they're utilizing Cisco through their kind of workflow, they could have a lot of intellectual property or anything along those lines. So this is what people are starting to hijack now, because they can sell those off or whatever else. But the intellectual property is real dollars and cents that you've paid as a company to kind of develop, and you want to make sure that you're holding on to it. And this is where Cisco is really providing kind of that privacy. So as we talked before, they have their data protection program. They do have international transfers of data. So if you are an organization that is working across geolocations, or even working with the EU or any of the Swiss personal data laws, they are built into it. And then one of the most important things that I like to look at are these third-party reviews. So what Cisco does is they've got a lot of their backend security really comes from Talos, which every single one of the Cisco products includes. But really what this is it's a service, and what they want is these third-party reviewers to come in and try to hack into the environment to be able to show them any type of intrusion attempts, or show them any type of malicious attempts that people are trying to get through. But Cisco's saying, because we have such a secure product, we do allow third-party reviews to come in and review our products. You can also look at those reviews if you want kind of a non-biased opinion as well. And part of the reason I'm kind of talking about security when it comes into kind of collaboration is because as we talk about this kind of work from home, hybrid work environments or even learning environments of kids going to a work from home, collaboration really starts at the bottom, but there's a lot of other pieces that really are built into it. Not only the connectivity part of it, but also the security part of it. So looking at, how Cisco's providing that complete value and how they have Talos and really their security arm in the back end, and about how security is really built into each one of their architectures is really important to kind of think about. So I do like kind of pointing out this slide. I know it really doesn't come from a collaboration point of view, but just looking at how Webex is being able to integrate into some of these security products to really help a lot of these kind of work personas. And as we go from a work from home, because this is what IT is really looking at, and IT operations kind of sitting in their middle is, what back-end operations I'm trying to help with the visibility, kind of performance monitoring. I'm trying to make sure I don't have any device risk and compliancy, but I also want to be able to scale, provision, orchestrate and automate those processes into a good solution. So it's what am I looking at? So from the work from home solutions, if you have that hardware worker, so somebody who's utilizing maybe that kind of GX80 or that Webex board, or they have an IP phone system, but they're also using Webex from a meetings, messaging, and calling standpoint, that making sure that person is who they say they are when they're logging into that computer. So using multi-factor authentication like Duo, for example, or from a software user standpoint, if they're just logging into that piece of software, but let's say they're a road warrior, for example. So I know, excuse me, when I was traveling a lot, I was having to log in not only from my computer, but from my mobile device to also my tablet as well, depending on what situation called for it. So looking at, if I'm using Webex, what other solutions like Duo to make sure that I am who I say I am when I'm logging into my devices, but also AnyConnect from a VPN standpoint to make sure that everything's going to be on this virtual private network as far as all the information going across it. And then that cloud user, so somebody who's maybe logging in from a personal device, but just logging into their Webex, same thing for them, looking at Duo, kind of making sure that the multi-factor authentication portion of it, but just looking at this as, just because you have that Webex portion of it, it is going to help with some of that data. But Cisco does have kind of one step even further when you're looking at security. That's going to be a big differentiator for them as far as making sure you're locking down that environment, making sure that you're protecting all your data, and making sure that nothing's really going to leave that environment for it by any malicious attacks, for example. So next, switching kind of gears from the compete side of it to talking about some of the compatibility and really what Webex is doing and Cisco is doing with Microsoft around the kind of their partnership for meetings. So, I understand that a lot of organizations are using Office 365. For example, a lot of organizations are utilizing Outlook, and pretty much a lot of their people are living in email and Outlook, and they spend a lot of their day in there. So as ITs or as those organizations and as these customers are trying to integrate a new calling solution, a new meeting solution, or a solution just like Webex, it's how do I help the engagement? How do I make sure I help the adoption of it? And as we were kind of looking at before, how do I make sure that a lot of these tools are plugging into the applications that they're wanting them to? And this is where, utilizing some of the Webex rooms and Microsoft and kind of Microsoft Teams is really creating this kind of client versus workload choice. So I like using this kind of example and looking at this because you do have some of those office productivity tools kind of on the left-hand side. You have your email and calendaring and Outlook, your file storage maybe in SharePoint, and your team collaborations maybe going through Microsoft Teams. Well, let's say your organization still likes to use Microsoft Teams from a messaging standpoint, but they still want to be able to utilize Webex when it comes to video calling and even utilizing some of those video devices. You now have those kind of API connectors to be able to integrate those workloads into the Microsoft Teams application. So if you want to be able to launch a meeting and you want it to be able to go through Webex, you can still launch it to that Microsoft Teams application and it'll launch straight into a Webex and kind of vice versa. So you have this parity between the two. And then additionally, as we're talking about some of these video devices. So if you have maybe spent the money or utilized on the Webex board side and you want to be able to use that Webex board within, your Webex meetings, but you also want to be able to use it for your Microsoft Teams meetings too, you can have some of that parity. And even on the Microsoft Surface side, side, you have some of that parity as well. So Cisco's kind of, breaking it down and learning that, not every application is going to be used the same, and a lot of these suites have different applications. So it's how can we integrate ourselves in with Microsoft to help with a lot of these workflows and create and really help stop a lot of these challenges that IT is having of these disparate tools are jumping between different applications. And then, just looking at this slide, so if people are looking at different workloads within the Office 365 stack, for example, so if they don't want to utilize any of kind of that Microsoft 365 stack and they want to use, the calling, Teams, meetings, and messaging, they can do that. But if they want to maybe use, Teams for just that messaging and meetings, and they just want calling and to be able to utilize those WebEx rooms, they can do it from there as well. So it's kind of one of those, pick and choose which ones you want. They can integrate kind of at any level they want to, but looking at meetings, calling, and kind of that Teams application as far as messaging, it's whichever they want to go with. They can integrate in with that Microsoft Teams, and they're really creating that better integration by looking at the certified video cloud interop. So, doing that it enables that WebEx room without any kind of SIP video conference rooms, and it's going to eliminate that third-party solution. So now you're not having to worry about adding in another third party that could break. One thing that's great about this, because I know at least coming from kind of that side of it, is sometimes if you do add in a third party and it does break that kind of connector, a lot of times those either Microsoft or Cisco will kind of point fingers at the third party, where now if you have the CVI interop, you're going to just go straight back to kind of that single kind of throat to choke, and they're going to be able to figure out any of those issues for you, so you're not having to worry about bringing in kind of the third party solution. I'll go ahead and just break right there real quick before we get into the education piece. Is there any questions, Nicole?
No questions yet.
Okay, perfect. So, sorry, I just got to adjust my headset. So the last section we're going to kind of talk about is really this education within WebEx. How is it really changing? And education's probably been one of the most impacted out of COVID, because it's trying to figure out how do we help these kids learn from home. How do we make sure that on the administrative side, that they're set up the way they need to. But really, it's how do we create this greater need for curriculum? How do we help these interactions within small groups? But how do we help learning not really stay static? So it's kind of looking at education, how it's changing, and we're kind of learning that, distance learning is really here to stay. So how can we integrate it into kind of our everyday education and really help our kids learn a lot more and be more effective? So really, what is smart learning? And everyone thinks, learning always comes down to the classroom and really what that experience looks like. But there's a lot really that goes on the back end when you're talking about collaboration and learning. It's streamlining that administration, so making sure that they can also collaborate with each other, talk about curriculum, making sure that they're having any type of meetings or anything along those lines or any updates, they have everything sitting within one place. They can have those communications sitting in one place, and they know that if they're going to be having those conversations, nobody else is going to be able to pick up on those conversations as well. So streamlining the administration portion of it, and then kind of add a piece onto it from the IT and the faculty portion of it, the endpoint and web security of those as well. So they're going to be looking at, identity and access control, and making sure that, anybody who's logging into that device is who they say they are, and they're not having anybody who's trying to pick up any information from that end. And then, expanding those learning modules for those students, depending on where they are, either in the office, in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And the kind of next two slides break down, for primary kind of K through 12 education, how are they adapting? What are they doing? So a lot of them are, the questions they're really asking are, how are you using technology to really enhance your lessons? What are you reaching, kind of beyond your immediate borders as far as kind of best learning practices through, when you're looking at kind of the K through 12. And then looking at kind of what we were talking about before with even on the end user and kind of business side, how are you engaging your students really beyond the classroom and keeping them engaged with the content that you're keeping them there, because they're not sitting across from you, they're not sitting in that live space. So how are you engaging them when it comes to either video or even through this application that's going to help them learn a little bit more? And then from your higher ed portion of it, how are you using technology to kind of enhance the lessons is really kind of the same message, but also how are you integrating kind of this new teaching and learning models, whether it's fully online, is it hybrid, is it in class? And then also from a distance learning perspective, like what's your strategy on kind of the instruction as far as, precautionary measures, and social distancing. So there's a lot of these challenges that both higher ed and even the K through 12 are really looking at. And this is where Cisco's really saying, why should you look at WebEx as compared to other video solutions that are out there? What are some of those differentiating factors that really WebEx has when it comes to education and helping a lot of teachers or helping a lot of districts, teachers, or universities when it comes to kind of the smart learning platform. So WebEx meetings and events is probably going to be the most important. So, for example, this webinar that we're on right now is actually ran through my own personal event space. So I was actually able to set this up. I was actually able to mute everyone kind of on arrival, so then we're not making sure there's any distractions. I could have it to where we have kind of a Q&A, and then I can also have myself as the host, so I can have myself on video. But it's also going to lock down this environment, so then I'm making sure that nobody's able to get into the meeting that isn't supposed to be there. And then even kind of going one step further, you do have what's called WebEx Training Center, and this kind of is your event center, but it takes it down to even a more granular level. So we've utilized our WebEx Training Center for a couple of our customer calls and stuff like that to be able to do polling. But from an education standpoint, if you want to do polling, if you want to be able to ask any kind of multiple choice questions or anything on the call or during the lesson, you can actually do that through the interface. You can actually do polling of that group. So if you wanted to ask any questions, you can have Q&A come through there. You can actually have someone raise their hand if they want to be able to ask any questions. But what's really great too is you can actually go into breakout sessions. So let's say that you do have a classroom and you're working on, a group project, and you want to be able to break out those 20 people that are sitting there into 4 different groups. You can pick and break out those 4 different groups, and as the host, you can also jump into each one of those meetings. The kids are able to have audio and be able to share content as well. So you're able to kind of jump in through each one of those kind of small meeting groups and then bring them back together. But what you're also getting on the back end, as far as kind of the teacher or the administrator, is you're actually able to look at some of the analytics as well. So what it's actually going to tell you is, if they were paying attention, and it can actually tell you in real time if you look at the participants, who's paying attention, if they have their screen minimized, if it's not minimized, if they have it pulled up. So you're able to get back some of that control, so you can actually say, hey, are these people engaged? Are these students engaged? And you're able to look at some of those analytics too to figure out, what kind of work they're doing. So that's just the kind of the meetings portion of it. And then of course you have kind of those kids will have their meeting rooms, or you will have your meeting space kind of as administrator. So you can have office hours and people jump into your kind of office hour spaces just by using your meeting link, but you're not having to worry about anybody else jumping into those meetings that may not have this link or anything else. You're not having to worry about someone kind of coming in and that isn't supposed to be there to that meeting. And then just talking about from the WebEx Teams perspective, so we're talking about kind of the messaging and collaboration, everything that kind of comes together, but group learning in a way. So if you do have those groups broken out, you do have the ability to set up kind of a space for all those kids, so they can have all their projects residing in one single kind of WebEx space. So all their information, the projects they're working on, whatever else, all the communications, all in that same space. If they want to meet, they can meet straight from that space. They can do any type of whiteboarding or anything along those lines. So there's a lot of stuff they can actually do, and it's going to keep everything in one centralized location. And then looking at one step further, so if they go back into the classroom or you're utilizing some of those classrooms with kind of a WebEx board on that side of it, you can also have some kind of intelligent devices there that you're able to have any type of whiteboarding. So if you have a teacher that wants to go up to the front and kind of do some whiteboarding, or even on the back end, if you have some kids that are even on their tablets or something and they want to be able to whiteboard on their calls, they can do that too. So as long as you have a touch interface and you're utilizing the WebEx side of it, you can actually have that whiteboarding. Excuse me, I actually take that back. You can actually use your mouse too now within the WebEx control to do some whiteboarding. So if you have kids that are trying to look at, doing whiteboarding or want to be able to work on these kind of projects, they can still do that while within that kind of team space as well. And then you even take it one step further for kind of the Cisco Webex and education connectors. You do have some of these kind of integrated, APIs into some of the leading LMS systems. So whether you're using, Blackboard or Moodle or any of these, you are able to have these collaborate and integrate into each other. So you can kind of have that attending live classes remotely, holding meetings in office hours, and also sharing files and collaborating and iterating. And this is kind of breaking down that, distance learning, just understanding what tools are really created in this distance learning point of view. But looking at, as we were talking about before, those WebEx teams, that WebEx meetings, and those WebEx rooms to really create this experience for those students, and we'll kind of get down to what that experience looks like for those students and really for that administrative team a little bit later. But just expanding those kind of learning modules as they're doing right now, but using the WebEx platform to be able to do that. So, video-based instructions with recording. So if you wanted to record any type of videos and send them out to them, you can do that. But using the, Teams messaging as workflow for students. So if you want to meet one-on-one, if you want to utilize the small groups before and after classes, they can be able to do that, but giving that same face-to-face experience just as like they were having in the classroom, but just expanding that into kind of the education space. So this is where, we were talking about kind of the employee engagement before, and really this works into even the education space and keeping kids, engaged, and especially students, keeping them engaged when it comes to kind of the online collaborating. And this is where, that state-of-art video, the messaging, the ideation platform, it has a very, very simple UI. So if they're able, it's got the one big green button to push. So all they have to do is push that to get into a meeting. Like I said, it does have some touchless features to it as well. So let's say if you have kids, or let's say you're a college campus and you have small reading rooms that you want kids to go into, and you wanted them to be able to, not touch anything to be able to launch those meetings, I can use my mobile device to be able to launch a meeting from my mobile device and transfer it to a WebEx board just by typing in a code. So then I'm not having to touch that device. They're not having to clean it. I'm able to do everything from my phone. So kind of it's that student engagement, keeping everything kind of touchless, and then also keeping everything cloud connected too, right? So if you have those students who are going into the classroom maybe a couple days a week, or maybe have to go to an after-school program or whatever else, if they're using their own PC and they're going home and utilizing maybe their tablet or their own home computer, if you're utilizing that WebEx space and it's in the cloud, you're able to have that same information, that same cloud-connected projects, that same workspace, all that information is going to live within that kind of WebEx application. So I know, just from my own example, I've gone out to meetings before and I've forgotten to maybe pull, a certain PowerPoint presentation or whatever else, from our company network down to my computer before I left for that meeting. But luckily I had it shared in my WebEx team space. So when I got out to that meeting, I realized, oh shoot, I can't share this because I don't have it. Well, I was able to pull it down through my phone from our team space and able to share it that way. So, accessing your data really anywhere, and that's what Cisco's trying to kind of create with this. And then looking at the administrative collaboration side, right? So, if you're the administrator, if you're the teacher, if you're wanting to hold or even conduct student parent-teacher meetings or anything like that, you can still do those one-on-one meetings. Driving this cross kind of department collaboration, kind of decision-making. So if you want kind of that team space for your administrative team where they can talk back and forth as far as best practices. But really one of the biggest challenges that I've heard that's really happening within organizations, within a lot of schools, is really helping a lot of these teachers adopt and make sure that they understand how to use this application before they get into it. And that's what Cisco's really created. It's a very easy application to be able to jump into. It's very easy to share. It's very easy to run these types of meetings. A lot of everything's done on the back end. And even then you have some of these assistants like the AI assistant who's able to help with some of the adoption side of it too. So that's been a large challenge as far as the administrative side, is making sure that they're getting the tools that they can adopt and give them most effectively, so then they're able to concentrate on teaching and not necessarily learning the product just so they're able to teach, right? And this kind of brings us into our case study. And what I liked pointing out was Cisco had done a case study with a school that was based out of the Czech Republic, which is called Ariza. I believe I may be kind of butchering that, but facing very, very kind of similar challenges that a lot of schools are facing right now. But they were mandated to to close, due to COVID-19. They needed to switch to all online classes to educate their students, and tutors and lecturers needed to be trained on delivering these lessons. So a lot of the same challenges that, our schools are going through here in the US, or as they're going back to school, how do we figure out how to do this kind of safely? So the solutions for them were Webex, Webex Meetings, and Webex Teams, so kind of that whole solution all the way down. And then, classes, so as a result, classes shifted from an in-person to interactive online, within days. And then students were able to seamlessly join these meetings and go into online projects without working any type of difficulties. They were able to set up kind of separate rooms for them. But additionally, they were actually able to, and then as part of this results, they were actually able to move all their after-school clubs to Webex after seeing how well it worked. And then another thing that I always like to kind of go through is looking at what the principal said. So she was, finding that some students, in particular lower and second grades, had made huge progress in their participation in this approach and the communications, and they received, positive feedback from parents and students as far as utilizing the platform and being able to communicate with each other. So I know we have, a couple minutes left. I want to thank you guys for sticking around and letting me go through kind of this webinar and talking about a lot of this information. So I want to make sure we open it back up and kind of answer any questions for you. So Nicole, is there any questions that are in chat right now? Any Q&A?
I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but this would be a great time for anyone to announce if they do have any questions. I know we've discussed a lot of the different ways that Cisco Webex gives us both security and analytics. It's very unique, and I think that it's something that many schools and corporations are going to look for as remote learning becomes the new normal. We're going to want to know who's paying attention. We're going to want that intelligence in terms of seeing who's who, and we're going to want that ease of use. So as we become more accustomed to remote learning, we're going to want more options, and Cisco seems to be the leader in terms of options and intelligence. Please do any questions in the chat. We look forward to hearing them.
Yeah, and then additionally, I know we did cover a lot, and it was a lot to really go through within an hour. So if there's, something you can kind of take away from this, and you have other questions, or maybe you go back and start digesting the information, you have something that pops up, or a certain specific case that pops up, feel free to engage your LightWerks team, and they can engage us, and we can help you really from the Cisco side of it, and really understanding what the solution looks like, or how we can really help, within a specific solution, or even helping with something, or even solving some of those problems as well. Is there anything popping up in chat? Sorry, I'll try to stop my screen real quick so I can actually look. Okay.
Two questions. I see a question from Alonzo.
Okay.
And I see a question from David.
Yep. So I see, sorry, I'm going to go through this. So I see one from Alonzo. He said, does Webex have solutions to integrate VoIP and SIP calling into a video conference solution, something like a hardware or licensing add-on to existing codecs, such as SX20 and Webex RoomKit? Sorry. Yes, they do have it, and that's something that we can always talk about offline too if you're looking for a specific solution. I'll make sure to follow up with you kind of offline too as well, should you have any kind of deeper dive into some of the devices and how they can actually, integrate into some of the calling and kind of video features. And then, sorry, I'm trying to see if there's any other questions in here.
I see Doug also has a question.
Sorry, I'm trying to go through it. The learning curve seems steep. As there are actually trainings, involved. So Cisco actually does, organizational trainings, so they can actually help, from kind of any phase of it, what you're really looking at. They do have kind of free trainings that you can look at, that they've done, hosted as far as running through, and they even have kind of an adoption kit. So should you, want to allow people to go through and kind of learn on their own pace, they have a kind of an adoption kit of, learning the ins and outs of it, from kind of just a basic user down to kind of a power user, even to kind of your IT team and understanding the whole back end of it. But even then, should you want somebody who wants to help on the kind of, let's say, even learning side of it, or you want to be able to run an event or something along those lines, you can actually have someone come in and show you how to run that event. They'll kind of run you through step by step and show you how to do it. So then the next time you're able to do it, you kind of have someone that's able to hold your hand kind of through it. So I'm not sure if that answers your question completely, but I'll make sure to send my information, off to Nicole and her team, and they'll make sure to share it with you guys. So if you have any extra questions, you can go ahead and get back to me with that one. Was there anything else in chat? Sorry, it's minimized on my screen, so it's kind of harder for me to look. All right, I don't see any other ones in here, and I apologize if I'm missing any. Somebody saw my flag back here. What's my favorite BMW? M2, I'd probably say. I don't know. I'm a fan of coupes. Sorry, that was a question that came in. So I don't see anything else in the chat. So if do you have anything else you wanted to tie in there, Nicole?
No, Josh, I think this was fantastic. It was a lot of information. I know you had to go pretty quickly in order to get all of that in there, but you managed to get all of that content for both corporate and education. I think we all have a really thorough understanding of how and why Cisco Webex differentiates itself from the competition. It's a totally different beast, and we can all kind of speak to those differences now and understand where the solution fits in the remote collaboration space.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you all, for joining the webinar. As I said, this actually is recorded, so I'll make sure that Nicole and her team has the recording so they can send it out to you. But if you have any additional questions, as I said, feel free to reach out to your LightWerks team, and we can help you out kind of with anything along your kind of Cisco journey or answer any questions for you additionally. But thank you once again. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week and have a great and safe rest of your day. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you.